In this video, I'll show you how you can use Asana step by step, from setting up your account and choosing the right pricing plan to exploring all the key features like my task, portfolios, goals, reporting, and many more. By the end, you'll know exactly how to organize your work and manage projects effectively, even if you are a complete beginner. Alright, so now you want to get started by setting up your account here in the website of Asana. So you can go here by using the link in the description. Once you're here, is that you want to click here on login or get started if you don't have an account yet. And then once you're here, you want to now simply provide your login details by connecting your Google work account or provide your email right here and click on continue. Once you're done, you will now be prompted with some questions regarding your company details, personal details, and so on. So you just want to provide that about your work. And then after that, you will now be prompted here into the dashboard where you can now use Asana. And first thing that we're going to discuss in here is that we have this create button right here in the top left, wherein you could create your task, your project, message, portfolio, goal, or invite your team member. In this way, you can just click here and then create one of this instead of going here into this individual tools manually and creating each one from here. So yeah, this basically just quick access. You can create your task, as you can see right here, and then your project, wherein you'll be taken into your workflow gallery. And we have the message where you can send a message here on your workspace to your members. And you could also go for portfolio. So this is where you can create your portfolio, which we'll be discussing more of this, all of this right here later on. And then the goal, this is also where you could do it easily and invite your team members. Click here on invite and then just put in their email address and add the projects that you would want to be accessed by them. So now let's go here into homepage and discuss this. So first, you'll be seeing the date. And then we have this one right here. So you can select the time range on what will be displayed here on your homepage. You'd be able to see the task completed for this week and then the collaborators that is assigned for this week's task, goals, and many more. And then we have my tasks right here. So tasks you add here are private unless you add collaborators or add the task to a shared project. So this locked sign signifies that this task or this project is currently private. And then we could also create task from here if you want to. You could click here on 3 dots and then you could also remove this widget if you would want. So you could also customize your homepage by adding widgets or removing them. You could also go for half or full size. You could click here on view all my tasks and create task. Then we have this projects right here, wherein you could also create your projects and same thing. You could also remove this if you want. We have the learn Asana, the task I've assigned goals, people, and click here on customize. Or here, then you can now add a widget here into your homepage with a background right here. You could also change the background depending on what you want. So in my case, I just want it to be like that. And then you could go for now widgets. You can go portfolio, status updates, which I think is important. So I'm going to put it right here. And we have the private notepad, the draft comment, comments mentioning me, Asana AI, and many more right here, depending on how you would want your homepage to be built. So you could just drag and drop it, and then that's how easy it is. Next is we have the My Task section. So this is basically your personal to-do list inside of Asana. It automatically gathers all tasks assigned to you across every project and team in your workspace. Instead of jumping between projects just to see what you need to do for today or just to see the task that is assigned to you, this is where you see everything you are responsible for in one place. You can see the recently assigned, due today, due next week, due later. You could also add section if you'd want to do more. You could also remove this or edit them however you'd want. You can personalize your My Tasks in here because this is your own personal space. And in here, we could see that we have this. You can click here on actions. So you could add task via AI. You could add task via email, sync or export. This is where you'd be able to do that. And then we have the share button in here. So you could also share this with your teammates to let them organize your work if you don't want to. That is where you could share. And then you could also customize this. So in here, you could go for this project. You can add a field, rule with AI Studio, app, and so on. So this is a more advanced feature right here. So yeah. And next is that we have this one. So these are what you call views. So we have the list view, board view, calendar view, dashboard, and file. So these are the default views, but you have more when you click here on the plus button. So in here, we now have the note right here, which we could add right here. So basically just a sticky note just for noting down things and so on, which I will be demonstrating later on. So now we'll just be going here into the list and let me explain on what you could do with this and what it's for. First up is that we have the list view. So this is basically a spreadsheet style list of tasks. So this is best for detailed task management, great when you need to see assignees, due dates, and custom fields in a structured linear format. You want to use it when you want a clear checklist or when working on assignments that need precise tracking, as you could see everything here so easily and clearly. And from here, you also have this filter buttons right here so that you'd be able to filter down the results, sort, group, and options right here. And basically, this is also where you could add a task or create a task in here. You can click on drop down if you would want to create an approval, milestone, or section instead of the task right here. So we'll be discussing more of this later on after we have discussed the rest of the views. Second is that we have the board view. So this is a Kanban style board with columns. It's like to do, in progress, or done. So this is a great visual workflow management. So it is perfect for tracking progress stages, moving tasks across columns, and seeing bottlenecks. You want to use it for content pipelines, project phases, or agile workflows. For example, I can drag this here into due next week if this is moved for next week task. Or I could also go for another section, let's say completed, right here. And now that we have completed right here, we can now navigate here and drag this task into completed if it is completed, and it would also be updated here in the list. As you can see, we now have completed here also, and the task is updated in here. So basically, these are all the same data, but just a different view depending on your preference. Next is we have the calendar view. So this is a calendar that plots tasks by due date. So this is best for planning and scheduling. This helps you spot workload peaks, deadlines, and gaps. You want to use it when managing campaigns, deadlines, or time-sensitive deliverables. Next is that we have the dashboard. So this is where you would be able to see a reporting view with charts and metrics. So this is for high-level project insights. This tracks projects, workload distribution, and completion rates. You want to use it for status updates, stakeholder reporting, or quick health checks on a project. So that's it. And then you could also add a widget right here into your dashboard so that you'd be able to personalize it. You could go for chart, and then you would now be able to customize the chart in here. You can make it bar, stack, group, line, and so on. And then the chart data in here, add a metric, filters, and so on. And then it will now be added in here. Next is we have the files. So this is a gallery of attachments that is uploaded into the task or a project that is assigned to you. As you can see right here, I now have this attachment that I have assigned to a specific task. And basically, it's this picture in here. You can now click on that. You can click here on download or add feedback if you'd want, and so on. And yeah, basically, we're going to go here into this list. We can see this task right here, and I have attached this into this task, and now I can see it here into my files. So this is great for centralized file management. Instead of digging through tasks, you can quickly find documents, images, or assets. You want to use it when collaborating on creative projects or academic reports with lots of shared files. And lastly, we have the note. So this is a space for project context, notes, or a brief. So this is best for documenting goals, guidelines, or reference info so everyone understands this project's purpose. So you can use this to outline objectives, add instructions, or keep reference material handy. So in here, you can now add a title, let's say sample note, right here. And then we can now highlight this, and then we could now format the text. So the title here is not formattable, but when you go here now into the body, is that we can now format this. Let's say first part. Right here, we can now highlight that, format it right here. We can now make it a heading 2, heading 1. We can click here on plus if we would want to create a new text element like heading, bulleted list, quote, and so on right here, and then format it using this ones right here. So yeah, that's how you could do that. And then you could now add more text right here and so on. And this is where you'd be able to see the parts right here in the notes by clicking here on view outline. And yeah, this is basically it for the views here in the tasks. Next is that let's click here on add task, and let me show you what each one of this does. So first is click on add task. When you click on that, you'll now be prompted in here. So now you can now click on this one to bring up this pane so that you would be able to add more details right here specifically. And in here, we can now write a task name. Let's say sample task 2. And then we can now add an assignee. So in my case, I'm the only member here, so I'm the only one that can be assigned. And then the due date, we could click on that, and then we would now be able to select a date. And then add a project in here that you would want to put this into. And then we have the dependencies right here, like the task, meeting, and so on right here. So you could also do it right here. So this is basically the feature to add tasks that need to be completed before this one right here. Let's say that this task solely depends if this project or this task is completed. So if this task is not completed, then this task will not be done or should not be completed. And then we have the fields in here that you can add. You have the description. You could also add it right here. And then you could also format this. You could click here on the plus button to do some formatting. Basically the same thing with the note view that we did earlier. And then you could also create a subtask in here in this task if you would want to break down this task into smaller pieces, into actionable steps if this task is too big. So yeah, you could add your subtask in here, task 1, and then you could always add more if needed. So that's it for the subtask. And then we could also go for the draft subtask using AI. You could also go for the due date in here, and then the assignee for this subtask. And then we have the comments, all activity, and so on. And then the collaborators here, you could also add them in here. And you could also leave task if you don't want to do this task anymore, or if you don't want to get assigned here. That's it. And now next is that we have the approval right here. So you can click on that, and then we will now be able to create an approval. So basically, the approval here is a special type of task that requires a decision rather than just completion. So you could approve right here, request changes, or reject, as you could see right here, if you have the permission to do so. And this is great for streamlining sign-offs on deliverables, designs, reports, or any work that needs stakeholder review before proceeding. And you would be able to see that this is private. You could also make it public by clicking here. So approval is visible to everyone in my workspace if you would want that. And next is that you could go for an assignee right here on who should complete this task, a due date, projects, dependencies, and so on. So yeah, we have already discussed that. So basically the same thing. And then we have this buttons here, by the way. So you could click here on like this approval. So you could put in a like, and then you'd be able to see that you have liked this or the reactions in here. And then you could also attach files. You could add subtask, copy approval link, full screen, and then we have more. So you could add this to projects. So in here, so basically the same thing in here. So you could go create a follow-up task 2. You could add a task. tags if you would want to organize this better. Could merge duplicate approvals and many more right here, and even use AI. So that's it for the approval. Next thing is that we have the milestone. So this is a marker in your project timeline that represents a key achievement or deadline. So basically it appears as a diamond here in the timeline view. And this is great for breaking large project into meaningful checkpoints so you can track progress toward big goals. So yeah, basically like a milestone itself, literally a milestone. So I'm going to click here and then I'll now be able to expand this again. And then I can also add the details once again right here and then mark as completed once done. So basically the same thing with the other things right here, just for a different purpose. And next is that we have this section. So for this one right here is where you'd be able to add the sections in here. So basically this button right here, same thing right there. And yeah, so all in all is that approvals is for decision checkpoints, milestone is for project markers, and sections are for organization buckets, which are this one right here, untitled section. So I would want to delete that. Click here on the three dots and click on delete. You could also duplicate, rename, and many more. So yeah, this is basically it for the basics here on the My Tasks section in here. Next is that we have the inbox, which you can click here under My Tasks. So this is your notification hub inside Asana. It shows updates on tasks, projects, and messages that involve you, whether you're the assignee, a collaborator, or mentioned with a @tag. So instead of relying on scattered emails or chats, everything relevant to your work streams into one place, which is here in the inbox. The question is, what's included here? So basically, you'll see notifications when a task is assigned to you or unassigned to you. A task you're on gets a due date change, is marked completed, or becomes overdue. Also, you can see that right here. Or someone comments, upload files, mentions you, or a project or team you're a part of has a new message or update, and a task is created or follows, gets likes, merges, or attachments. Basically, anything that happens that you are involved in a certain task, project, or work. And we have the activity right here is where you'd be able to see mainly all of them. And then the bookmarks is where you'd be able to add bookmarks on certain things so that you could keep your favorites or important things in check right here. And then we have the archive. So this is where you'd be able to archive notifications if you don't want them to be seen on your main hub. And you can click here on Add tab, wherein you can create a custom tab. And this is where you'd be able to filter out your notifications. So you could name the new tab in here, Sample Notifs, right here, for example. And then now you can go for the inbox summary. You can click here on Manage Notifications. And now you'd be able to see the settings. So you could go for Slack notifications, project notifications, portfolios, and many more. You could turn that on and so on, depending on what you would want to receive. So that's it for the inbox. Next is that we have the reporting tab under Insights. So this is basically Asana's built-in analytics and visualization hub. It pulls live data from your tasks, projects, portfolios, and goals, then turns it into charts, graphs, and dashboards. So now let's set this up first. So click here on Get Started if you haven't already. And now from here, you can see reporting, dashboard. You can now create a dashboard in here. Click here on Create. And then you will now be able to add a chart. So in here, you can see what's recommended. So you could go for incomplete task by project, project by status, resourcing, and so on. So you have these templates in here that you would be able to add, or you could click here on Add Custom Chart, and then you'd now be able to design your own if you would want to. So basically the same thing with the view here in Tasks, which is the dashboard view, which is this one right here. So yeah, you could go here and let's now create one. And let's say we're going to go for incomplete task by project. And then we can now modify the chart details. You could go for report on, include task, chart style, chart data, filters, and more. So depending on what you'd want. In my case, I'm fine with this. So I'm going to go click here on add. And it will now be added, as you can see right here. So instead of exporting to spreadsheets, you can see progress, bottlenecks, and workload directly here inside the reporting right here under Insights. And basically, this is where you'd be able to add custom widget. Same goes with the dashboard view, just like I have discussed earlier. When you click here on add widget, you can now go for a template chart, which is this one, adding template. Or yeah, basically the same thing again, custom chart or template. And then we have the text in here. If you'd want to add text, like in here, you want to put up some notes in here that you would want some reminders or description about this reporting that you have right here or this dashboard. Now, if you would want to create another one, you can click here and then you could click on duplicate if you want to. And then you could now go for a dashboard name. So let's say I'm going to go for a sample dashboard. And then you could include members and the description if you want and click on create new dashboard. And then it's not created, as you can see right here. And now I could just click here just to go into the dashboard. And now we have it right here. It's that easy. Now let's go back in here into reporting. And then we would now be able to see all the dashboards that we have right here. So you can just go into the dashboard and then you'd now be able to see the custom dashboard that you have made so that you'd be able to tailor this dashboard to see only the stats or analytics that you would want from a certain project and so on. So that basically this is built for tailoring or customizing the analytics that you would want to see depending on the purpose on what you are doing it for. So yeah, you can create a dashboard in here and so on. It's that easy. Next one is we have portfolio. So this is basically the high-level container that groups multiple projects together. It gives you a real-time overview of progress, status, and deadlines across all those projects in one place. You can think of this as your executive dashboard. Instead of opening each project separately, you see everything side by side. In here, let's now set up by clicking here on Explore Portfolios. And from here, it's now creating our portfolio, and now it's going to begin. And in here, we can now create our new portfolio, or you could open up this first portfolio that is created for you by default. So you could click on that. And from here, you'd now be able to see the portfolio. And in here, we now have this views again. So now here we have the list, we have the timeline, the dashboard, we have the progress, workload, and messages. So we now have some more views compared to the My Task. So we could click here on plus again, and then we now have these views right here that we would be able to add, but it's already added right here. You could also add a note, which is the same thing with a task. You could still add some notes in here. So now I'm going to show you on what the new views do and explain to you what it is. So in here, the previous views that we have discussed here in My Task are basically the same, which is the list, timeline, dashboard, and note. Now we have these three new views. So progress. So this is basically a high-level status tracker for each project in the portfolio. What you see in here would be the overall % completion of the project. You could also see the project status, and the key milestones and due dates and custom fields if you would want to add a custom field. So in here, we would now be able to see that the portfolio is on track, project on track, and so on. Portfolio summary, you can update the status, and this portfolio of work is on track, and so on. And yeah, this is basically where you'd be able to see that. And we have the workload. So this is a resource management tool that shows who is working on what across all projects in the portfolio. So what you see in here would be the tasks assigned to each teammate, timeline of their workload, and then the overall overload indicators. So in here, we would now be able to see the task that is assigned to me right here. So there is only me in this project. So I could click on that, and then I would now be able to see the task in here. And then we also have this one right here. And this one, same thing. It's basically this project and then the task in here. So yeah, that's basically it. So this is the timeline, the start date, and then the end date right here. You can also adjust that if you would want to. And then you can click on that certain task to open it up right here. And now you'd be able to see the due date would now be extended to 25th And then when we adjust it, it will now also be adjusted just like that. And yeah, that is basically it for workload. Now let's go into messages. So this is a communication hub for the entire portfolio. So what you see in here would be the conversations, announcement, or updates tied to the portfolio. You could also see replies and discussion in one thread instead of scattered across projects. Next one we have is the goals. So in here, what are goals in Asana? Goals are high-level objectives you set at the company, team, or individual level. They are not just tasks. They represent outcomes that you would want to achieve, and they can also be linked to projects, portfolios, and milestones. So now let me show you by clicking here on Create Goal. And from here, we can now go for the goal title. Let's say Team Goal Number 1. And then the goal owner, you can assign someone in here, the time period, the quarter, and then the halfway right there, and then some more details. And then we have the privacy. We can make it public or private. And then the members, you can assign it right here. And then once you're done, you can click here on Save Goal, and it will now be created. And you'd now be able to see the goal completion right here, about this goal, the progress, and so on. So now, if you would want to connect this into your project, then what you would need to do is navigate here at the bottom, wherein you would now be able to see related work. Now you can connect relevant tasks, projects, or portfolio, and then you can select one right here on what you would want this goal to be connected into. Let's say this one right here, this project. And now it's connected and it's on track, and then you would see the updates in here. And next is that you could also connect a sub-goal right here. Basically, sub-goals would be the breakdown of a large goal into smaller trackable outcomes. So you could think of this as milestones in creating your bigger goal, which is this one right here. You can click on connect to a sub-goal, and then you could click on create new goal. If you don't have one yet, you can go for a goal title. Let's say achieve or get 1,000 subscribers. Right there. And then you can go for the goal owner, members, time period, and privacy. Click on save goal once you're done. And then you would now be able to create this one right here. Now, let's go back here into my workspace goals and go here into the team goal that we did. And then we now have one sub goal, as you can see, which is the goal that we have created for another one. And inside this sub goal is that we can create another sub goal if needed. And then inside that sub goal, create another sub goal, and so on. So yeah, until you are satisfied with the sub goals. And that's how you'd be able to create the goals here in the goals feature or tool here in Asana. So yeah, that is basically it. You can create now as many as you'd want right here, and then you'd now be able to track that right here in the team goals. You could also go for my goals if you would want to create one right here for your personal goal. Then you'd be able to see that right here, and then you'd be able to see the owner. So if you're the owner, you should see that here in my goals. And then we have the strategy map. So in here, it says, welcome to goal strategy map. So we could go for the goal title. Let's say sample goal, and click on continue, and then click on create one goal. And then basically here it is. So this is the strategy map of our goals in here that we have created. Now, basically, these are connected via sub-goals. As you can see, we have our goals right here. And then inside it, we have one sub-goal, right? So we can click here on expand, and then you'd now be able to see the sub-goal that we have created here for this goal, which is to get 1,000 subscribers, and then the project that it is linked into. You'd be able to see that the line here is broken. That means that this goal is linked into this project. And this one right here with the complete whole line is that it is basically a goal. So you'd be able to see that right here. And that is what strategy map is. And next one is that we have the projects tab right here. You'd be able to see all the projects, portfolios, and many more. Even though they show up in the same sidebar section in here, they serve different purposes. Just so in case that you're confused that it is a project section, but why is there a portfolio in here? So basically, this is just how Asana does things. So they group it in here because they treat both the projects and then the portfolio as work containers. So this is where you can see that. And then you can click on the plus button to create a new project or a new portfolio if you'd want. So you could always do it right here. For example, a project timeline. You could use this template and then name this project. You can go for the privacy and click on next. And then you can now go for the start date and end date of this project. And then you could also schedule tasks on weekends if you want and create project. And that's it. We have now created our project timeline. And now we have it right here. And then we now have the views again that we would now be able to use. And in here, we now have a new view, which is the workflow view. Now, this is a visual automation builder inside your project. Instead of just seeing tasks, you can map out rules, triggers, and actions that define how tasks should flow. You can think of this as a process designer. You're not just managing tasks, you're designing the system that manages them. So in here, we will now be able to decide how will the task be added to this project. So now we can click on form submissions, task templates, or from other apps if you would want to integrate other apps into Asana. So you could definitely do that. So let's say task templates, and then we could now add a template right here. We can create a task, milestone, or approval, or you could go for a new type if you would want. So yeah, you'd be able to create that right here. And then after that, you'll now be able to go here into this section. So basically, you could now add a trigger to move task into this section in here. So when task move to the section, what should happen automatically? So yeah, basically, when you move a task, then you could now select what would happen. Let's say I would want to set the assignee to me. So I'm going to go here, choose the assignee to me, for example. So basically, this would be the workflow. So when task is moved to a section, check if the section is untitled section. So you could also modify that. Let's say section is not right here. And then you could go for untitled section. Next is that we have the Gantt view right here. So we can click on Gantt view and it will now be prompted right here. So basically in here, we can now select the project dependency settings. We can maintain buffer, consume buffer, or none, depending on what you'd want. In my case, I'll just go for maintain, click on save changes. So basically, this is a timeline style chart that show tasks, subtasks, and milestones as horizontal bars across the calendar so that you'd be able to see the start and end date. And then you could, again, modify it right here. And then you can think of it as a more advanced structured version of timeline view, which is ideal for projects with strict deadlines or multiple moving parts. So this is an improved version. It's designed for visualizing project schedules, dependencies, and deadlines in one glance. So in here, you'd be able to see the task. We could see the instructions, the example task, and so on right here. So you could also see the assignee, due date, blocked by, and so on. So basically, these are dependencies. You could always add a section if you would want, or you could also add task in here if needed. So yeah, this is basically it for the Gantt view. It's that simple. And we can always click here on add task. We can see the date range right here. We can go for today and many more right here. So this is basically for months now. And yeah, that's the Gantt view, which is basically an improved version of the timeline view. And we also have overview right here in case you're wondering. So it's basically an overview of the things in here in this certain project. So yeah, it's that simple. And yeah, that is basically it for the project right here on how you could create them and what it's all about. Next thing is that we have the team in here. So we can now click here in team where we'll be able to see our workspaces that we have here in Asana. So this is where we'd be able to customize our team members. We can go here into members and then we could now see all the team members. We can edit by removing a team member, adding a team member right here by providing their email and so on, and some other settings in here like the projects or works. And then we have the messages right here. So this is where you can send message to your members and where you'd be able to see the messages. We have the calendars for the deadlines or the projects right here. And then we have the knowledge. So this is where you'd be able to add terms to give teammates shared context while they're collaborating on work in Asana, so that everyone would be able to understand what everyone is talking about and so on. And then you could also add note if you want. So yeah, this is basically it for the tutorial here in Asana on how you'd be able to use every feature in here effectively. Now, one last thing that we need to discuss would be the pricing plans, as this is essential in using your Asana. So from here, we're going to navigate here into the bottom left. And from here, we're going to click on the Add Billing Info. And then you will now be prompted in here into the pricing plans. So in here, I'm going to help you decide on which one you should get. First off is that we have the starter plan. So this is the Get Serious plan. It's for teams that have outgrown sticky notes, spreadsheets, or the free Asana tier and now need structure. It basically introduces timelines, dependencies, and automation, so you can actually manage projects instead of just tracking tasks. So basically, this is best for small teams, but growing, like student groups, startups, and small agencies who need to hit deadlines and keep projects organized. This is perfect if you're managing one team's work and want to avoid chaos without paying for enterprise level tools. And next is that we have the advanced plan. So this is the cross-team alignment plan. It's not just about managing tasks, it's about connecting multiple projects and making sure they ladder up to bigger goals. It adds portfolios, goals, approvals, and proofing, so you can manage complex workflows across departments. This is best for mid-sized businesses, agencies, or academic programs where multiple teams or groups need to coordinate, and also ideal if you need formal approval processes like design reviews, academic submissions, or client deliverables. And lastly, we have the enterprise plan. So this is the scale and control plan. It's less about the new project features and more about security, compliance, and admin power. It gives IT teams the ability to control access, manage users at scale, enforce policies, and integrate with enterprise systems. This is best for large organizations, universities, corporations with strict compliance needs, and teams that need advanced security like SAML, SCIM, data controls, and centralized admin oversight. So yeah, this is basically it for Asana plans. I have now discussed every pricing plan in here, and now you should have an idea on which one you should get. And by the way, the subscription that we use on this video or this tutorial is the advanced plan. That is why we have the features, almost all of the features actually ready for us. And if you sign up here on Asana, you would get a 14-day free trial automatically here in the advanced plan. You don't even need to provide your credit card or whatsoever. You would automatically get it. So if you'd want to do that, you want to go into the description, use that link in signing up for an Asana account, and take a look there. There might be some bonuses, special offers and discounts or coupon codes that you could use to jumpstart your journey here in Asana. So that's it. Thank you for watching and see you in the next one.